Hi, this is Father Joe Cisetti. Thank you for joining me once again. Of all the parables of Jesus, the prodigal son is probably the longest, one of the most moving, one of the most famous, and one of the most challenging. And it's something that has caught the imagination of artists through the centuries. And I'd like to meditate with you on four such artistic renderings of this story. The first, the most famous one really, is by Rembrandt. The prodigal son returns. Things are dark. There is the light coming in from the left, falling on the sun, mostly earth tones with some reds. The father receives them. You see one of his shoes, his raggedy shoes, has already fallen off, and you see his dirty feet. And he very quietly is placing his head against his father, who embraces him with both hands. There are two figures there who are well dressed, who seem to be watching. Are they touched by it or not? It's kind of hard to tell. They seem a little reserved. There's another figure from behind watching. He doesn't seem to be as well dressed. He seems to be captured, more moved by the emotion of the whole event. Is it the older son or not? I don't think so. I don't think so because the older son was upset. This young man is moved by it, and the older son was still out in the fields, but don't know for sure. As I mentioned, this is probably the most famous rendering of this. Henry Nouwen wrote a book called Return of the Prodigal Son, and on the cover is this picture. The second one that I'd like to look at with you, the same time period, so this is 17th century. Rembrandt was in the 17th century. This next one, Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, was a Spanish artist. His works are often noted for some of their sweetness. The prodigal son, again, it returns. You see his dirty feet. You see the father embracing him. He is looking up at his father with his hands clasped in prayer. But there's more people around here. There's more action. In a rather delightful way, the family dog seems to be very glad that the son is back. Some servants, or at least one servant, is bringing some of the fine clothing to put on him. A man and a child are taking the fatted calf to be slaughtered to prepare the feast. So you have a lot of things going on there. But at the center of it, you still have that warmth, that compassion, you have that tenderness. Pompeo Buitoni was an Italian artist of the 18th century. This is one of his renderings of the Return of the Prodigal Son. No other people, just the father and the son. And you see the son, again, with his hands clasped in prayer. As with Rembrandt, he's leaning up against his father. He is semi-nude. The light is coming on him. And the very well-dressed and multi-layered father is spreading his cloak around him to embrace him even more and to welcome him home. This marvelous sign of love and mercy and compassion. And finally, what I'd like to share is my favorite version of this. This is an icon. On the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, there is a community of French-speaking Benedictine nuns. One of the sisters there, Sister Marie Paul, who recently passed away, was an iconographer. And this is an icon that she wrote. Just for a little detail here, painters paint paintings. Iconographers write icons. They don't paint them. And an iconographer will spend time in prayer. An iconographer will even fast and prepare to do work to write an icon. And the whole point of an icon is to lead people into prayer. It's to lead you to pray with your eyes. In the prayer series that I'm doing, talk about Lectio Divina, okay, divine reading. Well, there's also a Visio Divina, praying by what we see. And this is a marvelously rich painting. It says in French, The Return of the Prodigal Son. The colors are very bright and vibrant. You have all that gold. There is that marvelous green, that bright red, contrasting with the white of the returning son and what he's wearing. Now, so an icon certainly has a different style than these others, and yet something the same is being communicated. Mercy, love, compassion, forgiveness. Look at the hands. The father reaches under to support the son by his elbow. He puts his other hand on his shoulder, and the son is resting. He's resting on the father's chest. He's being embraced. He is receiving the love. He is receiving the mercy and the forgiveness. Interestingly, he's clothed in white. Well, people who are baptized are clothed in white. And perhaps there's an illusion here. And the father is going to say, my son was dead and now is alive. The important thing to remember is this love and compassion of God. Jesus says there's more joy in heaven over one repentant sinner. And so when we confess our sins, when we share in the sacrament of reconciliation, God rejoices over us. And sometimes it's helpful just simply after sharing in that sacrament to simply rest in God's love and let him rejoice over you. As he says, my son or daughter was lost and now is found. Sometimes we think about this parable as that of a good son and a bad son. But actually, this father had two bad sons. They were just bad in different ways. And in both cases, the father, contrary to his station in life and his dignity, goes out to the sons. He goes out to the younger son who has returned, and he leaves the party. He goes out to the older son who will not come into the house. And so in the end, this is not the story of a good son and a bad son. It's a story of two bad sons who have one very good father. So do we.